Today I wanted to talk about hoarding and my own personal experiences with hoarding. My mother is a hoarder, and I wanted to talk to you about that, as well as how I have tried to involve myself in a positive way in that situation and some of the challenges and mistakes I've made along the way. And hopefully this is a way of talking about a very difficult thing, but it's an important thing because in the US, hoarding is definitely on the rise. If you're not familiar with hoarding, hoarding is usually associated with some sort of mental challenges or mental illness, and it often involves people easily acquiring things. So they like to go to yard sales or go shopping, and they acquire things quite easily, but then they have a really hard time on the other side letting go of things. And what this results in is overfilled homes. When you walk into a hoarder's home, you know immediately you're in a hoarder's home. Surprisingly, as I was working through this with my mother, I discovered that most hoarders, a vast majority of hoarders, don't realize they're hoarding and don't realize they're hoarders. They don't look at what they have as a problem at all. They just think, oh, I'm a collector. I'm holding on to things of value and I'm collecting things of value, and they don't see kind of the dark side. So I wanted to discuss a little bit of my own experience with my mother's hoarding. Another aspect of hoarding is typically hoarding might present itself throughout life, but it often goes into overdrive after a great loss, usually the loss of a loved one. And in my own mom's case, she was always, growing up, she always had signs of hoarding, but it really kicked into overdrive after her own mother died. And let me just walk you through a little bit of an example. This is a little bit gross, but this is reality when it comes to hoarding. So my mother has 2 dogs and 1 cat, and she had a carpeted home. And the dogs peed and pooped exclusively indoors. They were so used to defecating and urinating inside that they would hold it. When you took them on a walk, they would wait until they got back into the house, and then they would pee and poop. And the way my mom dealt with this is she would let the poop dry out over several days and sometimes weeks or months, depending on how hard it was to find. And the reason she let it dry out is it was easier for her to pick up. So she could pick up the dry dog poop much easier than wet dog poop. So when you walked into the home, it was an overwhelming smell, and it very much was not healthy. There's bad smell, and then there's something where you think it's a biohazard, and this was definitely the biohazard category. So you'd walk into my mom's home and you would see dog poop in various states of dryness, at least 5 or 6 in the main living room. And then the urine, she just let that dry. I think she cleaned occasionally, but the vast majority of the dog urine just soaked into the carpet, and that was that. And this is after decades of that home being home to many dogs and cats that were all, having accidents on the floor. So this is just one example of my mom's hoarding, and she didn't see this as a problem. So the house was filled with stuff, as per hoarding, but she also wasn't seeing the biological hazard she was creating, the lack of safety. So this home was not a safe environment to live and breathe in. And my mom's health was definitely under duress. My mom couldn't get through a single sentence without coughing 5 or 6 times, usually much more. But every 3rd word she'd cough and cough and cough. And then she'd go through coughing fits. And she wasn't even really self-aware of this. And then she had this other thing that happened to her with her sinuses. Her sinuses would become inflamed. And she just kept saying, oh, it's my allergies are acting up. She really thought she had allergies that would act up. And her sinus issues would cause her to have horrendous headaches that would kind of stop her from living her life for 2 to 3 days at a time. And my mom didn't connect the dots between her poor health and the hazardous environment she was creating within her home. The air quality in her own home was so bad that when you walked in, within a 5 seconds you knew that it was really bad for a human to live in this environment. I mean, it was just not just a bad smell, but everything was decomposing, and you can just imagine the years of dog urine and dog poop in the home. And so when I tried to talk to my mom about this, this is where I started learning about the connection to mental illness. My mom was very unreasonable about even discussing it. She was immediately insulted with everything I said, even if I pointed out facts. She felt very insulted, and it was a very touchy subject to even talk about this stuff, and she often needed to walk away from me. So there was a complete inability to communicate around these topics. Luckily, my mom, I spent a lot of time on the web, looking at videos like this, or watching therapists talk about these ideas, and reading papers, and I'll get to some of those ideas in a moment. But luckily, my mom did soften as I was able to learn how to interact with her in a healthy way. So it was a lot of work on my end trying to figure out how can I talk to her in a way that's beneficial to both of us, because all the things that I naturally thought just weren't working. So luckily, my mom allowed me to clean out the carpet. So I got rid of the carpet and I replaced it with linoleum, because I figure if the dogs, or I guess the flooring is called vinyl, so that way if the dogs pooped or peed inside, it would all be easy to clean up. And then I installed a dog door, and it just took a few weeks. We took some of the carpet that they were used to peeing and pooping on, and we put that outside in the yard, and that sort of trained the dogs, oh, we want to go still on this carpet. And so they would go, and quickly they were potty trained. So then my mom's home, although still nowhere near clean, was much cleaner than it was before. And then that fall, we had my mom's air ducts clean out for her heating system. She has a furnace downstairs and central heating. So all that air that was full of the feces and urine and all kinds of other biological hazards was just filtering through on recycle through her heating system. And when we had that cleaned, within 2 days, my mom's cough completely went away. She could get through entire conversations without a cough. And prior to this, she couldn't get through a single sentence without a cough. And we're talking years. So this was a huge and very positive improvement. So I was very excited about that. When I brought that to her attention, she was so disconnected, she didn't even notice the difference. And I find that very interesting that she didn't notice her own health quality. Another area of her health that immediately improved was her sinuses. So her sinuses were no longer inundated with all these materials and particles and bacteria and viruses and funguses. Instead, they were getting more clean air, and her sinuses were able to clean themselves. And so she was not getting her allergy attacks nearly as often. Instead of getting them every week or so, she was now getting them once every couple of months. And there's still, like I said, there's still a lot of room for improvement. Her home is still full of materials that are in various states of dry rot or decay. And so, when you take a pillow and you fluff it in the sunbeam and you see all the particles come out of that pillow, we'll multiply that up by 1,000 for each room. And that's what my mom's home is. So every item you touch, you're kicking up massive amounts of dust. And she's living in that environment. So it's not perfect yet. We have a long way to go, but we did get a little bit of growth. And the purpose of this video is, one, to share with you my own story, and certainly some of the challenges I went through I want to share in a separate video on sort of how to talk to someone with hoarding disorder. But I also wanted to ask for your help. If you're a viewer and you have gone through what I've gone through, or maybe you've had more success than I've had, where you've actually helped a hoarder get things under much better control than I have with my own mom, I would love your comments, or even to connect with you and make a video with you about what your experience was and how you wrestled with various things that I struggle with. So let me talk about one of my struggles. One of my struggles is my mom does not hear what I say. And this is very important, because it's really tough to communicate with someone if they're not hearing what you're saying. Instead, my mom hears her own story. And that makes it very challenging. And so I have to work extra hard to try to communicate what I'm trying to say. And I don't have a lot of success. Let me just give you the stereotypical example. So the stereotypical example of a communication issue would be, let's say that my girlfriend and I are going out on a date, and I say, "Wow, you look really great, honey." And she says, "Oh, so I don't normally look great. I only look great right now." Now, although that could be implied or inferred from what I had said, that's not true, right? So that's not what I'm saying. It could be inferred incorrectly in this case, but the challenge with that type of communication is she would be saying her own story and not tuning into what I'm trying to share, which is, hey, in this moment right now, you look very beautiful. And an example in my mom's case is she would just hear criticism, constant criticism. So if I said something to her, let me try to think of an example. Oh, I would try to point out to her that, hey, Mom, the fact that you can't walk through your home is very dangerous. This is very dangerous. Like if the fire department had to come, you know, those firemen have gear and you'd be setting up a hazard for them. It's very unsafe. Not to mention you have a hazard for any of your guests or yourself. And she just hears criticism. She thinks, oh, Sam doesn't think I'm good enough. Sam's insulting me right now. But I'm just pointing out facts. These are not criticism. It is a fact that if you have narrow walkways, firemen are not able to get through, and that's why they have fire code. Fire code requires certain width pathways all throughout your home, so heaven forbid if there is a fire, the firemen can easily navigate your home. They're already risking their lives just being in your home. The last thing you want to do is make their job even harder by making pathways too narrow. For example, if my mom were trapped in her own home during a fireman might put himself in significant risk just to try to save her because of the state of her home. So instead of hearing these facts, my mom hears these criticisms. Another example is my niece and nephew from Colorado like to visit Idaho, and my mom lives in Idaho. And we don't take my niece and nephew to my mom's home because it is a biohazard. And when I try to share with her, I try to share, you know, Mom, your home, it's dangerous. It's the air quality inside is so dangerous, and that's one reason you're sick so often. And we don't want to subject these young children who don't have fully developed organs and systems, we don't want to subject them to a bad air quality, or as I call it, a biohazard. And again, she hears insults. She hears criticism of her as a human. She hears, oh, you're not keeping your house good enough. She hears, we can't visit you because you're not a good enough person. And these aren't what I'm saying. What I'm saying is actual facts that these children are so young. Well, now they're older, but this was years ago. These children were young, and we didn't want to subject them to a dangerous living environment. And my mom's home was a dangerous living environment. That's not an insult to say that. That's stating a fact, or that's sticking to what I believe is reality, is that, hey, this home, wow, this is back when she had the dog poop and pee constantly, among other things. I mean, the house was very dirty in other ways. That was just one example. So it was very much a toxic breathing environment. But my mom just hears the criticisms. So it's very challenging to try to communicate with her in a way that she would understand. And again, I'll get to that in another video, some tips on how to communicate with hoarders. That'll be a separate video just devoted to that topic alone. But this video is to share with you that story. Maybe you have someone in your own life who's a hoarder and you don't know how to help. If that's the case, there are definitely resources online, and I would say that be careful what you say, and even when you're very careful about what you say, recognize that they may not be hearing what you're saying. They may actually be hearing a much worse story. Or if you are a hoarder, just recognize there are people trying to help you, and they mean well, and what they're doing might come off to you as very insulting or condescending, and that's understandable. But at the core is this love and this desire to help. And that's certainly something I've been trying to work through with my mom. So again, this video is to ask for help. If you have ideas on, sorry, let me backtrack. If you have helped someone with hoarding disorder and have tips for me, I would really appreciate it. Let's say you can relate to my experiences with my mother because you've helped someone else through it. What are some things that really got you past a hump where you tried to help them help themselves, basically? If you've been enjoying any of my videos, please hit the subscribe button. That helps me know that these videos are helpful to people. Hit the like button if this video is a personal favorite of yours, or if you connect in any way with this video. And of course, comments are always super helpful. Comments help me understand what you or how you are interacting with this video. Thanks very much for your time and attention, and I'll talk to you later.